This is a $30 Casio. You can buy it at a gas station. The United States Navy issues this exact watch to the men it sends to dive into the dark. Underwater, for a mixed gas combat diver, this piece of plastic is the clock his decompression runs on. Get the timing wrong, and it kills him hours after he is back on dry land. So why is the richest Navy on Earth trusting its divers to a gas station watch? Because it used to do the opposite. 60 years ago, it issued a watch that set the standard for every dive watch since. The same year, a Pentagon Spec sheet filed a soldier's watch under a new category, Disposable, and the Navy quietly stopped competing. On paper, that was smart money. Watches get lost, smashed, and buried with the men who wore them, on paper. And it worked. That $30 Casio was so right it earned 4 official NATO Stock Numbers, and a Navy SEAL is still wearing one in a Defense Department photo taken this year. This is the story of how the richest Navy on Earth left its divers timing their lives on a gas station watch. A disguised Blancpain buried as radioactive waste. One spec sheet dated 1964. The gas station watch that outlasted everything the Navy issued. And the day the same kind of watch turned up on a terrorism watch list. 1964. In one building, the United States Navy takes delivery of the best dive watches ever made. In another, the same military signs off on a document that calls a soldier's watch, quote, disposable. Both papers carry the same year. Only one of them won the next 60 years. It was not the good one. To understand how a $30 Casio ended up on the wrist of a Navy SEAL, you have to start with the watch it replaced. Because the Navy did not always think a fighting man's watch was worth nothing. For a while, it thought it was worth everything. And the best dive watch was never jewelry. It was a life support instrument, built around one clever part. A bezel that turns only one way, so it can never lie to a diver about how much time he has left. By the 1950s, the world's navies were buying the finest of them money could make. And the best dive watch on Earth came with a problem. It was Swiss, a Blancpain, and a 1933 law called the Buy American Act barred the Navy from buying a foreign watch. So the Navy and Blancpain did something that sounds made up. They invented a fake American company. They called it Tornek-Rayville. Rayville was just an anagram of Ville Ray, the Swiss town Blancpain came from. They printed that name on the dial, and the United States government bought a disguised Swiss watch from a company that existed only on paper. And on the Navy's own test bench, the disguised watch earned it. In the trials, it was reportedly the only watch that passed, beating the Rolex Submariner, the most famous dive watch in history. The watch the whole world remembers lost. The watch almost nobody has heard of won. Here is how much the Navy valued these things. They glowed using a radioactive material called promethium. And when the program ended, most of them were not sold or kept or handed down. They were returned to the Atomic Energy Commission and buried as low-level radioactive waste, their casebacks stamped, quote, danger, radioactive material. The finest dive watch the U.S. Navy ever issued was so prized and so hot that the government sealed it away. Fewer than 30 are known to survive. One of them sold at auction in 2023 for $114,000. And this was not only an American story. The British issued their own divers the real Rolex Submariner, the one collectors now call the Mill Sub. They made barely 1,200, and a single one can sell today for the price of a house. For about 20 years, the most dangerous men in the water wore the best watches money could buy, and their governments were proud to pay for them. And then, in the very same year the U.S. Navy took delivery of a watch so good it had to be sealed away as nuclear waste, a different office signed a different piece of paper, a new specification for a soldier's watch. And it used one word the Golden Age never would have: disposable. The document was called MIL W46374. The Pentagon signed it on October 30th, 1964, and it is one of the strangest things the United States military has ever put in writing, because it is a specification that asks for a worse product on purpose. Most military specs demand the most: more range, more armor, more accuracy. This one demanded less. In its own words, the watch was to be, quote, disposable and, quote, not intended to receive maintenance support within the military supply system. In plain English, do not fix it. Do not service it. When it breaks, throw it in the trash and grab another. The Pentagon had written a requirement for a watch designed to be thrown away. On paper, there was a real argument for this. A wristwatch in a war is consumable. It gets smashed against a rifle, flooded in a rice paddy, stripped off a body that never comes home. Issuing 500,000 men a delicate, jeweled, serviceable watch is expensive when most of them will lose it inside a year. A cheap watch that runs for 2 years and costs almost nothing to replace is, by that math, the smart buy. On paper. In the field, here is what that math bought. The watch the new Spec accepted could survive about 6 feet of water. 6 feet. A swimming pool is deeper than that. 9 months earlier, the Marine Corps had ordered 10,000 of the watch this one replaced. A 17-jewel Benris, a hacking movement, a real instrument, at $28.28 a piece. The new Spec threw all of that out. No minimum jewel count, no hacking, a sealed plastic case that would flood in the shallow end. In the same year, the Navy took delivery of the finest dive watch on the planet. The United States military signed for a watch that could not survive a swimming pool. Now, to be fair, the disposable watch did not go straight onto a diver's wrist. Not yet. For a while, the military ran 2 systems at once. The grunt got the throwaway. The diver kept getting a real one, a Benris dive watch rated to 1,200 feet. 1,200 feet for the diver, 6 feet for everyone else. So the abandonment was never one cruel morning. It was a budget line, trimmed 1 cycle at a time. A fighting man's watch stopped being a tool the Navy kept. It became a cost the Navy cut, and the direction only ever pointed one way: down. When the quartz crisis hit, cheap electronics gutted the old watch industry, and Benris, the company that built the Navy's dive watch, went bankrupt. The military started reaching for whatever was cheap and already on the shelf. A Seiko here, a Marathon there, and eventually, it did the thing that quietly ended the whole story. For most of its people, the United States military effectively stopped issuing watches at all. It became a bring-your-own-watch force. The richest military on Earth looked at the wrist of the man it was sending to war and decided that was his problem to solve, which left the diver exactly where the grunt was, the man going into the dark. The one whose decompression still ran on a clock strapped to his wrist was now going to have to go and buy that clock himself at the base exchange with his own money. Next to the razors and the energy drinks, he would not have to wait long for an answer. Because in April of 1983, on the other side of the world, an engineer in Tokyo was standing over a sink, about to drop a watch out of a 3rd-floor window for the 200th time. April 1983. A Casio engineer named Kikuo Ibe had just watched a mechanical watch his team built shatter on a hard floor, and he refused to let it go. His goal sounded impossible for the era, a watch that would never break. His team called it the Triple 10, 10 meters of water resistance, 10 atmospheres of pressure, a 10-year battery. They built prototype after prototype and dropped each one out of a 3rd-floor bathroom window onto concrete. More than 200 of them shattered. The breakthrough came when eBay watched a girl bounce a rubber ball in a park and realized the answer was to suspend the watch's guts inside a hollow cushion, so the shock traveled around the module instead of through it. The result was a squat, armored block of resin you could run over with a truck. Casio called it the G-Shock. It cost about $30. The United States military did not order it. It did not test it. It did not write a spec for it. It did something quieter and far more damning. Its best men just went out and bought it. Through the global war on terror, the G-Shock, and one model especially, the DW6600, became the unofficial standard on the wrists of SEALs, Delta operators, and Rangers. Men who could have worn anything traded in their issued Seikos and their personal tutors for a lump of plastic from a Tokyo electronics company. Chris Kyle, the most famous sniper in American history, wore a G-Shock on deployment. Not because anyone handed it to him, because it was the best tool for the job, and it cost less than a tank of gas. And here is where the story turns from funny to absurd, because the system that had quietly walked away from the watch could not ignore what its own men had decided. So the bureaucracy did the only thing a bureaucracy knows how to do. It cataloged it. 4 different G-Shock models were assigned NATO Stock Numbers. If you do not know what that means, here it is in plain terms. A NATO stock number is the bureaucratic blessing that turns an object into official military equipment. It is the same supply credential carried by a spare part for an F-16. A $30 watch you can buy at a gas station now sat in the Federal Supply Catalog with a number next to the machinery of war. Think about that. The military spent 2 decades in a stack of specifications trying to make a watch cheaper, and the watch that finally won was one it never asked for, never designed, and could not have built. It went further. The Navy started handing one G-Shock, the model DW-9052, to its dive candidates at Buds, reportedly all the way until 2018, in a plain brown cardboard box. Special Operations Command reportedly bought around 1,000 of a rugged version called the Mudman in a single order. The richest, most lethal military in human history had outsourced the watch on its frogman's wrist to the checkout aisle, and then formally adopted the result. And here is the detail that makes a watch person wince. The G-Shock the Navy hands its divers is tough, and it is water-resistant, but it is not a certified dive watch. Casio's own paperwork says it is not built for scuba. The Navy was issuing its frogmen a watch the company that made it says should not be taken diving. The dive watch the Navy gave up 60 years earlier now sells for $100,000 at auction. The watch that replaced it came in a cardboard box. It is easy to laugh at that. A gas station watch beat the Pentagon. And be clear about how it won. Not by being cheap, by being better. The Navy did not lose to a worse watch. It lost its own standard. And this is the point where the same story stops being funny. Because that $30 Casio is not a punchline. Underwater, it is the only thing keeping a man alive. Go back to the mixed gas diver from the start of this story. When he descends, the pressure drives nitrogen into his blood and his tissue more the deeper and the longer he stays down. Come up too fast, and that gas boils out of him like the fizz when you crack a warm bottle, bubbles tearing through his joints, his spine, his brain. Divers call it the bends. It can cripple a man, and it can kill him, and the cruelest part is the timing. It does not always hit in the water. It can wait until he is showered, dry, and asleep on a cot hours later, and then stop his breathing. The only thing standing between him and that is arithmetic. How deep, how long, how slowly he comes up. And the instrument that runs that arithmetic, the bezel he turns at the bottom so it can only ever tell him he has less time than he hopes, is the watch on his wrist, which is now a $30 Casio. And that is only one kind of diver. The SEAL swimming a closed-circuit rebreather on pure oxygen faces a different clock entirely. He runs shallow, often under 25 feet, leaving no trail of bubbles to give him away. And his enemy is not nitrogen, it is the oxygen itself, which turns toxic with depth and time, and can drop him into a seizure underwater with almost no warning. For him, the watch is not a decompression computer. It is a countdown on how long his own air can keep him alive before it starts trying to kill him. Same plastic watch, different death. So you would expect the record to be full of stories. Cheap watch fails, diver dies. Here is the unsettling part. It is not. Search the open record, and you will not find a single documented case of an American diver killed because his watch quit. And that absence is not proof the gamble was safe. It is the silence of a community that does not publish how its operators die, and a military that classifies the worst of it. The honest version of this story is not that a $30 watch got men killed. It is that the system bet a diver's life on a gas station watch, and then made sure no one could ever add up what that bet cost. That is how a cheap Casio quietly won the war for the American wrist. But there was a second Casio in that war, cheaper, flimsier, and it was about to surface in a place no one in this story saw coming. First, a correction, because it matters. The watch in this part of the story is not the G-Shock. It is its poor cousin, a flat, thin, $10 plastic Casio called the F-91W. And for about a decade, owning one could help land you in Guantanamo Bay. Here is the watch itself. It launched in 1989, it costs about $10, and since the 1990s, Casio has sold something like 3 million of them a year, which makes it, by most counts, the best-selling watch in the history of the world. Your grandfather might have one in a drawer. So how did the most common watch on the planet end up treated as the sign of a terrorist? Here is how the cheapest watch on Earth became, in the eyes of the United States government, a weapon. The F-91W keeps good time and has a simple, reliable alarm. That alarm circuit, it turns out, also makes a clean, dependable timer for a bomb. Al-Qaeda figured that out early. At training camps in Afghanistan, instructors taught recruits to wire an F-91W into a detonator and handed the watch out almost like a diploma, proof you had finished the bomb-making course. When Ahmed Rassam, the man who planned to bomb Los Angeles International Airport on the eve of the millennium, was caught at the Canadian border in December of 1999, his timers were built from Casio watches. The same quiet little circuit that woke a soldier for his guard shift was waking up bombs. By the time the United States was running the prison at Guantanamo Bay, the watch had become a checkbox. Leaked detainee files revealed an internal threat matrix that treated owning a Casio F-91W as an indicator of Al-Qaeda training. Picture what that meant. A man could be picked up, and the fact that he was wearing the most common watch on the planet, the same $10 Casio sold in every corner shop from London to Lahore, could become a line of evidence that he was a terrorist. Osama bin Laden himself was almost never photographed in a Western brand. The one he wore was a Casio. And this is the moment the whole story snaps together. Two different Casios, one $30, one $10. One on the frogman's wrist, one in the bomb maker's kit. Step back and look at both wrists. On one, the American frogman, sent into the water by a military that had decided his watch was not worth buying, so he bought a cheap Casio himself. On the other, the bomb maker that same military was hunting handed a cheap Casio as the graduation gift of a terror camp. The richest military on Earth had opened a vacuum where a soldier's watch used to be, and a $10 piece of Japanese plastic filled that vacuum on both sides of the same war. The same company, the same checkout aisle. One watch keeping a diver alive, the other counting down to a detonation. And the only move the institution had left was to take the most popular watch in human history and write it down as a threat. Which leaves the one question this whole story has been circling. If a $30 watch ended up on the wrist of the Navy's best men, and a $10 watch ended up arming the enemy they were sent to kill, and the United States military could not control, replace, or even keep up with either one, then who exactly lost? So who lost? Not Casio, not the operators who got a watch that does the job for almost nothing, not even the enemy. What lost is the dive watch the Navy buried as low-level radioactive waste, the one it decided was too good to throw away. 60 years ago, this Navy believed a fighting man's watch was worth everything. Today, it hands him $30 at the base exchange and calls it solved. And it is the same arithmetic every time. A procurement system optimizes for what it can count. It can count how many watches it bought, tested, and stacked in a catalog. It cannot count whether the watch on a diver's wrist will still be running when his decompression depends on it. So it counted the first thing, and the diver paid for the second. No one ever sat down and decided the frogman did not deserve a good watch. The watch just slipped off the list, one budget cycle at a time, until the cheapest thing on the shelf was the only thing on the shelf. And here is the part that should sit with you. The military did find a watch good enough for its best men. It is a $30 Casio. It sits in the Federal Supply Catalog, and it is genuinely one of the toughest watches ever built. The institution found the answer. It just refused to be the one to hand it over. The Navy reportedly stopped issuing that Casio to its dive school back in 2018. The SEALs are still wearing it. You can find them in Defense Department photographs taken this year, on the wrist of a man going into the water. The same $30 watch, bought the same way, by the same kind of man, under the same system that decided that was good enough. Same wrist, same gas station watch, same gap where a real one used to be. The richest Navy in the world went looking for the perfect combat watch, and never once admitted it had been sitting in a gas station the whole time. $30, waiting for someone willing to buy it himself. If this made you want to go deeper, the books that shaped this video are linked in the description, and so is the vault where I keep everything from the script, research, and everything that didn't make the final cut. Subscribe for more, and the full collection of these stories is in the playlist on screen.